with your community. Yeah, that will help. But we're going to need your help in getting the word out that this tool is available for your community. I'm talking about getting this out to the schools, getting this out to the high school kids, getting it out to your neighbors, using it on social media, get the word out, let people know that this tool's available to them so they can use it when they can. Okay? So here's a clip real quick of what it's going to look like. Now, each one of these commercials is going to tell people how it works, how you can use it. This is just a clip, and here it is real quick so you can see it.
At Airlines Houston, we believe the knowledge of the quality of air you're breathing is everyone's right to know and understand. That's why we've partnered with Davis Air Monitoring to bring state-of-the-art air monitors to the greater Houston community. Houston air quality continues to be among the worst in the U.S., and climate change will only exacerbate the problem. Poor air quality originates from many sources, including the petrochemical industry along the Houston Ship Channel, large railroad hubs, sprawling daily commuter traffic, multiple residential manufacturing, and the weather.
Okay, guys, so this is a clip. This is not the completed commercial. The completed commercial is going to actually show the dashboard. It's going to show people how to access it. We're hoping to customize it. So Northside, you'll have your information on there. Gulfton will have theirs, and the other communities will as well. So we're hoping to have complete this in 2 weeks, and we're going to share this with y'all so you guys can hopefully get out to your community so you guys can use it. Okay? Anybody have any questions concerning the dashboard or the commercial at this time? You guys good? All right. So this is what we got on this part. This is how we got here. This is the dashboard, and this is the commercial. Okay. So we're gonna go move on to the next agenda item real quick. But if anybody has any questions here, just let me know. I'll be happy to answer that. And at this time, we're gonna bring up our main presenter today, who's gonna share with us some of the data of what these air modules have captured up to this point. After we get done with this presentation, we're gonna move on to an action plan, which this will be the opportunity for you guys to share with us what kind of action you guys want to take here in your community. So we're going to do that here momentarily. But at this time, Anthony, you want to come up, and the floor is yours. Just give me a second. I'm going to share the screen so they can see it on here as well. And start it. Yeah, now they can. I shared it. There you go.
Hi, everyone. As Juan said, my name is Anthony. I'm the Research and Policy Coordinator for Airlines. And today I'm just going to go through the data that we found so far. And this, to keep in mind, this is data from March to September of this year, because that's around when I guess our large monitors went up, the APIS monitors. But for the purple areas that were up before that, I'm going to show you data from since the time they were installed. So we have like a good year of data on those ones. So let's get started. First off, let's just do a quick overview of the pollutants that we measure across these air monitors. So the first one we have is nitrogen oxides, which include both nitrogen dioxides and nitrogen oxides, so NO2 and NO. And these are primarily emitted by vehicles and yes, for sure.
How do you make it louder? Or...
No.
Or I try now. Right, speak.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Hello. Check 1 2. I just turned it on. Right.
Hello.
Well, now.
Hello. I'll just try to speak louder. It's cool.
All right, go for it. All right, go for it.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, the first one we have is nitrogen dioxide, which are emitted by cars and industries. These contribute to breathing problems, acid rain, and ozone, and ozone is another one of the pollutants that I'll get to momentarily. The second pollutant is VOCs, or volatile organic compounds. This is a label that sort of captures a bunch of pollutants. It's just uses an umbrella term for chemicals like benzene, toluene, things like formaldehyde. It's like a blanket statement because the monitor doesn't have the capacity to measure each single one, so it measures all of them cumulatively. The third one, like I was saying, is ozone. That's produced, it's not emitted directly, it's produced by nitrogen dioxides and VOCs when they combine in heat and sunlight. And as you can see from the data that will show, ozone levels get higher in the summer, specifically because of heat. And the last chemical we have is particulate matter. So as Juan was saying, these are things like dust, dirt, soot, smoke, particles that you can see, but also particles that are too small to be seen by the naked eye as well. So those are the 4 pollutants I'll be going over today. And these are just some sources of pollution, generally speaking, that exist in Northside, but also in the greater Houston area. So the first one we have are, these are larger facilities, larger factories, chemical manufacturing plants, and these get covered under the toxic release inventory, which the EPA regulates. Second ones are smaller facilities, but they're still significant sources of pollution. They're called concrete batch plants. And they primarily emit particulate matter. The third source that we have is roads, freeways, and trains. These are mobile sources of pollution, and they primarily emit pollution when like trains are idling, like at a traffic light or when they usually stop to refuel and things like that. And the last source we have, which notably there's a lot of this in Near Northside, but not as much in other areas of Houston. And these are Superfund sites. And these are waste locations that have been historically polluted and they're currently undergoing cleanup, but they're not completely clean yet. So that means that they're still kind of emitting pollutants into the environment. But aside from these sources, these are just the ones that we have in our databases. There might be like a variety of other sources of pollution as well. Oops. So this is an land use map of Northline, where we have one of our monitors. We have our APIS Dorchester up there. And this is sort of what the land looks like around the monitor. As you can see, it's mostly residential, but there are a few significant industrial sources as well, most notably the Texas Independent Recyclers Facility, which is very close to the APIS, but also very close to the purple air monitor that we have by the fire station on Roosevelt Street. We also have a few concrete batch plants nearby, both on the east and west side of the monitor. And those are the primary sources of pollution in that area. For Northside, we have a couple of foundries which are captured by the toxic release inventory, but we also have concrete batch plants on the south side. And there you can see on the west are the Superfund sites that I was talking about, that you have about 4 of them in your Northside. And we're looking for more monitors to capture that pollution because, as you can see, we don't really have a lot of water. And in that area, we also have rail yards, we have concrete batch plants, so it's a very polluted site, and we're hoping to get some more monitors in that area specifically. And our APIS is there on Donald Street, and we have a bunch of purple areas as well on Elser, Embry, Gentry, and James. These are the 4 that we're going to show data on today, but we do have more monitors that were sort of installed later on. And that's just some of the sources of pollution that's in that east side of the north side. So this is what the wind direction looks like, average over March to September in the general Northside, Northline area. It's generally blowing in from the south. I know this wind wheel is a little confusing because the south side highlighted, but that means the direction of the wind is blowing in from. So it's primarily from the south, which is in line with prevailing winds from the Gulf area. But this is just to keep in mind because if there's a source of pollution on the south, then the monitor is going to catch it. But if it's above the monitor, then it's more than likely not catching. So again, these are the 4 chemicals that I will cover. For nitrogen dioxides, we can see that levels were increasing in the summer, but they seem to be going down now as the year is going on. And we also see that there were a significant amount of spikes in the summer as well, spikes that exceed these red lines that you see are the EPA standards for 1 hour and for the entire year. And some of these spikes were very, very high in June. And this is the same data, but averaged over those over the months of April to September. So you can see, like I was saying, the general trend is upwards for the year. It's still below the annual standard, but it looks to be increasing. And in terms of the two monitors, Gano seems to have a higher than average NOx reading compared to Dorchester. This is the same data, but it's for you who I guess prefer numbers as opposed to graphs, but it's the same data. And you can see that it's still below the annual average of 53 parts per billion, but the numbers have been increasing as the year goes on. So some major takeaways from nitrogen dioxide is that on like a day-to-day scale, on an average, the values peak at around the late afternoon, so about 12 to 4 p.m. Like I was saying, they trend towards higher concentrations as the year progresses. But something that's good is that both monitors seem to be in agreement, like I was showing you here. There is a difference in the average, but in terms of the pattern, they both are displaying the same general pattern. The Gano monitor is exposed to higher concentrations, and that's likely due to pollution and traffic from downtown Houston, since it's closer, it's further south. And like I was saying, there are also high peaks recorded at both monitors. And the highest peaks that we saw were in the months of June and July. But we did see that Dorchester recorded higher peaks, as you can see in those green lines. So it may be closer to the source of pollution than the Gano monitor. The next pollutant we're going to look at are volatile organic compounds. Like I was saying, this is like an umbrella term to include all of these chemicals that are mentioned here below. And we're seeing something really interesting when we look at data from the two monitors on this one specifically. We see that Gano has this sort of static measurement. It's not really picking up a lot. That's a yellow line you see down there. But the Dorchester monitor, on the other hand, is capturing these big swings and troughs in VOC measurements. And from a data standpoint, that's what you would see when the monitor is close to something that's emitting a lot of VOCs. It could either spike or go down. But when you have the monitor that's close to something that's not really emitting VOCs, that's when you see the line that what the Gano monitor looks like. So we're thinking that Dorchester, again, may be closer to an industrial source that's causing these levels of pollution. This is the same data, but it kind of looks like the opposite of nitrogen dioxide. But as the year goes on, Dorchester seems to be having lower levels of pollution. It seemed to peak in May, but it seems to be going down as the months go on. And those are the same values for each particular month. In terms of major takeaways, the daily values peak around 6 to 10 a.m., which is very different from NOx. And that's why we're thinking that it may be some sort of industrial activity, because we don't see a peak in the late evenings when traffic is very high. And we're thinking it may be the recycling plant as well. We just have to wait and look at more data. Something else that is notable is that the monitors are not in agreement, like the NOx values were. The Dorchester monitor is capturing a lot of the more swings and cycles. And like I was saying, the potential source of concern may be closer to Dorchester than Gano. The next pollutant we're going to look at is called ozone. And like I was saying, it's caused by the two previous pollutants. So when they combine in high temperatures, that's when ozone is formed. And from what we can see, there have been a lot of peaks of ozone too that exceed the 8-hour EPA standard. That big peak you see over there in yellow, that was caused by a power outage. So that's something we just want to be aware of for these monitors. They're not perfect. So when the power goes off and it comes back on, then they have a tendency to record these big peaks. So that's good because it's not a source of pollution, but that's something we want to keep in mind as well. The monitors tend to be in general agreement. They were kind of diverging from March to May, but as the year has gone by, they kind of have the same pattern. But Dorchester is exposed to a much higher average than Gano. These are the values again. It's definitely still below the 8-hour standard, but there have been peaks that are above that as well. And something that we're seeing in terms of daily values is that they peak twice, which is most likely caused by traffic because we see a peak in the morning around when people are going to work. But then we also see a peak in the evening. So it's most likely traffic that's causing ozone levels of pollution. And we also see trends that kind of follow the NOx and VOC patterns because, like I was saying, they both contribute to ozone levels. The Dorchester monitor is exposed to much higher levels than the Gano one. And that's something we want to keep in mind as well, is that some of those peaks, especially as the summer has gone by, have exceeded the EPA standards. And something else that we've also seen is that as it's becoming more hot, the peaks have become more prolonged, and that's likely because of the increased heat. And that brings us to our last movement, I believe. Yes. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this just because we have so many more monitors of PM. We have like about 5, I believe. So there's a lot of good data that we have on PM. This is just a recap on where our purple layer monitors are. So we got a good distribution of them. Some of them are close to the south, but we also have one at the north. And the one at Irvington is the one that Juan installed about a month ago. That's at the fire station across the recycling plant. And we got some good data from that as well. But in terms of trends, what we're seeing is that the ELSR monitor probably has the lowest levels of pollution. And that's because what we're thinking is because it's located very internal, it's kind of surrounded by those residential areas up in the middle. But the other monitors have significantly higher levels of pollution. And that's, we're guessing, is because they're closer to the industrial sources that you can see those red dots, but also the purple sort of squares as well. And that's what may be causing their higher levels of pollution. We're seeing that the ones located at Gentry Street and James Street have the highest levels of pollution and the highest peaks. And some of those peaks are very, very high. They're kind of reaching the upwards of 100 and 200 as well. And if you see the standards are at 12 and 35. So some of these spikes are very, very high. The average is definitely below that, but we want to be mindful of those spikes. And this is monitor data that we captured from the Irvington monitor. We only have a month's worth of this data, but again, we're seeing these very high spikes that may be caused by some sort of industrial activity. This is just a table to put into context, I guess, the readings that you're seeing. So when the readings are between, I guess, 0 to about 35 or 55, that's when they're about good to moderate. But when you see them increasing above 100, as you can see, a lot of these peaks go above 100 and above 200. That's when they get very, very unhealthy. This is the same data, except it's average over the month. And something good that we're seeing is that all of the monitors are in general agreement in terms of a trend. They were going down. The last time I reported this, I think in August, but what we're seeing in September is that all of them seem to be going back up. And that's kind of seen across all monitors. Irvington has the highest levels, and that's likely because of the recycling plant. But all of the monitors have been seeing higher levels in September. This is the same data, it's just in a number form. And you can see that the average for Irvington is even higher than the EPA standard. It's 14.6 and the EPA standard is 12. So it's very, very high. The daily cycles for PM, again, seem to mirror rush hour traffic, but they are influenced by some significant spikes as well. Like I was saying, the general trend was looking down in July, but now it looks to be going up again. The ELSR monitor, since it's located relatively residential area, has lower peaks, but all the other monitors are located near a major highway or some sort of industry. So that's why we're seeing those higher peaks. Cool. So those are the data from all the monitors. And this is just a quick review of what we did to analyze this data and just a brief summary of what we found so far. So in terms of a methodology, what we did was just calculate just mean averages for each month and overall over the lifespan of the monitor. We did that because it's easy to compare that with the EPA standard, and it doesn't require any further statistical manipulation. We also plotted the progression of every month on the line graph just to make it easier to see what pollution looks like over the course of the entire year. We have the screenshots of the day-to-day measurements as well, and we also observed the highest daily levels as well. But we do want to keep in mind some limitations to this data as well. The EPA standards are just guidelines. They keep being revised every few years. Just because the averages aren't at or near that standard doesn't mean there aren't any effects. Sometimes, like you can see, those very high peaks. those still have very significant impacts as well. And just because something is lower than the standard doesn't mean that it's necessarily harmless. There are some limitations to the monitors as well. They are limited by the direction that the wind is flowing, like I was saying earlier. And they're also limited by the type of pollution that they measure. So we can only measure the 4 types of pollutants that I mentioned before, but there may be some other sources of pollution that the monitors aren't picking up. So we want to be cognizant of that. Something else I mentioned, and if you recall, it applies to the ELSER monitor, but the area of location really affects the levels of pollution that are being captured. If it's near a more residential area, it may be influenced by what's happening nearby. But if it's near a major highway or a big industry, then that's going to be the most significant thing that's causing the pollution levels at the monitor. In terms of sensitivity, a peak doesn't mean that it's a single source. It may be there are multiple different sources. There may be traffic, there may be an industry, there may be some sort of smaller contributing source to the high level. It doesn't just necessarily mean there's one thing causing the high level of pollution. And we cannot pinpoint that 100%, but we can find a general direction to point towards. Something else that's important is that there are a limited number of monitors, and we're trying to increase that, and we're trying to get more volunteers to put up more monitors, just so we can capture a wider swath of the neighborhood and get more accurate data. So these monitors aren't everywhere, but we're trying to change that. And these are just some general conclusions again about each specific monitor, their averages, where they are in the neighborhood, and sort of what their daily peak looks like, and their trends, if you see on the bottom row. Yes, and this is again from March to, that should say September at the top because I added more data, but it's not exactly a year, but it's the better half of an entire year. In terms of next steps, what we're going to do is we're going to continue collecting and analyzing data. These averages, like I said, they may change. Like we saw in particulate matter, the average was going down, but then September started and all of them started going up. So as we have these monitors for more months and just for more time in general, we're going to see more data come in. And what we're going to do next is we're going to work with y'all to develop some action plans. And part of the work in that action plan is also developing and looking for new locations for new monitors as well to expand our network. And I believe that is it. Oops. Yes. I can definitely have some time to take some questions for y'all if y'all have any. So yeah.
¿Hay gente que habla puro español o todos hablan inglés? ¿Hablan español ustedes? Ahorita acabando, que acabe, ahorita me junto con ustedes y les explico más en español, ¿ok? Gracias.
For sure. Yeah, so one of the pollutants that is one of the major pollutions that the EPA regulates, but these monitors don't pick up, is sulfur dioxide. Other sources of pollution are like the VOCs that we see, like benzene and all of them. We know how much of them there are, but we don't have measurements on each specific, chemical. We just have like a general level. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the EPA grade monitors aren't like ones that can be installed at people's houses, and like they usually require like space because they're like large. They look like tanks kind of, so they usually take up a lot of space. So unluckily, we don't have the funds to be able to afford and the resources to install those monitors. But this, I guess, is a process that we come on a community level to having some sort of awareness about pollution levels. But the county does use some of these same monitors that we do. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You've been addressing air pollution. Is there a way to address or test odor? There's a lot of complaints about the odor.
So So these monitors don't pick up odor, but usually what is generally the case is that odor is caused by a pollutant of some sort, usually by VOCs, because those tend to be like the nastier types of pollutants that cause smells. But in terms of a monitor that specifically picks up odor, I don't believe this is the case, but there are, like I said, correlations between smell and, certain types of pollutants as well.
Thank you.
I'm at, but what happens on the level that the standards are exceeded?
For the monitors
Yeah.
or just in general? So for the monitors, like on the dashboard, when they exceed the standard, they become orange or red. And that's usually to let y'all know, just in terms of a general community awareness standpoint, to, maybe spend a little bit time, less time outdoors. In terms of, I guess, regulations or actionable like enforcement, that's what we're hoping to use these monitors for, is to, call attention from city officials, county officials, state officials, to that levels in the community aren't at standards that should be set.
Feature, on the, requires in the eighth is that if any resident wants to sign up for alerts, you can do that. Where if something gets exceeded, you'll get a text or an email that'll let you know that it's been exceeded. So that's gonna be an option that will be announced during the commercial that we're gonna release, so people have that opportunity to do so. That's an option that will happen as well.
In case, does anyone, I'll still be here in case anyone has any more questions, but
Thank you. Great presentation, right? Lots of hard work goes into making that happen. So my name is Jessica Fugel, and I'm working with Air Alliance. And so now what the question before us is, what do we want to do about this, right? Before we get started on that, let's talk about how you feel about what you heard. Anybody want to say, how do you feel about what you heard tonight? Scared. Scared? Why are you feeling scared? Well, yeah, right. You're specifically talking about this. Yeah. Okay. All right. Who else has a feeling? You have been taking notes. How are you? Yeah.
I work at the station, right
Okay.
next to the recycling center, so we
Oh,
notice there's a lot of problems.
okay.
Yeah, it's upsetting. Hopefully somebody can do about it.
Well, what we nice kind of channel the frustration or anger that you're feeling into action plans that will help us to take action. So that's what we're going to do now, right? And what we want to do is we want to work together to figure out what are the next steps. We're armed with information. And so now what we're going to do is ask ourselves, how are we going to take this information and turn it into action to make action? And we have this idea, and this is the first thing. We know that the recycling plant in the Dorchester community is badly affected by that recycling plant. So we're going to come over, if you are in that area and want to focus on that recycling plant and what to do about that, you're going to go with Jen here and Angie there are going to be in that corner, and you guys are going to talk about action plans that we can put into place. Now, one of the other things that Anthony talked about is a monitor is most effective when it's closest to strategically placed in a place where it's going to catch the most. And it may be that there are some monitors that are not in the most advantageous place, or we may need more monitors in strategic places. So for people who want to talk about how should we put more monitors up, if and where, you're going to stay here. Anthony's got maps, and we can talk about how to do it. I'll just let you know, the trick to that is you're going to have to figure out where, and Anthony has some ideas about where the monitors ought to go. The question there is, how can we find people who will agree to host the air monitors in those strategic locations? So if you want to stay here, we're going to talk about how to strategically place more air monitors so that we can get a better understanding of what's going on. And then is there any other action that anybody wants to take? Is there anything else that somebody wants to talk specifically about to address? Is there anything else that people would like to talk about?
Well, my neighbor here, one issue people have is like the odor and the, health effect that it has on us. My children and I, we have asthma. And, she said that the smell is so unbearable to her that, you know, she's like, what can we do?
Yeah, and this is by the side.
Yeah,
the
other side.
So, is this a conversation that can happen in the Dorchester community? Okay, so literally anything that you want to do related to the recycling plant, you're going to see over there in that corner, and we're going to come up with action plans. Before we move, is there anything else that anybody else wants to talk about? What are you thinking? Where would you go?
Well, I'm gonna say here regarding the strategy of getting more, locations. So my question is, what is this? Or the county doing to support potential change? Because I know some of the stuff's from businesses, which is tax base. Right. Of course, there's a benefit to the city of that, but if it's impacting the health of the community, what is the city doing, if anything? And how are we educating them?
I think that alone could be a conversation.
I don't want to open the doors.
No,
No,
you
no,
don't.
I don't believe we have any city representatives here, from, Washington in particular, nor do we have county representatives. So city and county people are local regulatory, airlines, not regulatory, but they are responsible for enforcing, frankly, the law, which is the Clean Air Act and the Texas version of the. But that I think could be a strategy to develop is how do we inform the city and the county and the state, for that matter. There are strategies for doing that. There are ways to report violations. There are ways to give information to them. That alone could be a conversation that's had that isn't about a particular source, but is about the neighborhood as a whole. How do we make the regulatory and enforcement agencies aware of what's happening? So if there's a group of folks who would like to talk through that, I think that alone could be a conversation where some strategies could be identified.
It can also be part of your activities that you set up. You know, if you guys want to like set up a meeting with the county to address a particular issue, I mean, we'll put that as an activity, we'll reach out to them and we'll set up a meeting with them. But you guys still want to be part of it, so that could be something you can do.
Amazing organization, and they have a lot of amazing assets, including Leticia, who is their legislative director. So she's agreed to stay here in this place for people who want to talk about where to place the air monitors. So we'll pick up that discussion here. Okay. Is there anything else that anybody else would like to talk about? If not, now if I want them understanding Spanish language, people can go over to that table. Okay.
And before we break out también, also, I do want to recognize we have a representative for Kenny Shaw's office, Mr. Duncan Breyer, right? Yeah. He's here today, so thank you so much for being here today.
The website link for the dashboard.
We're gonna-
Put it up on the.
We're gonna send you a QR code. If you signed in, we have your email, so I will send you a QR code. They'll have the links to the particular dashboards.